Welcome to Beneath the Bible, where we're helping you dig deeper and uncover the world beneath the sacred book. In 1865, the poet William Rose Wallace wrote a verse that's been turned into a popular saying, "The hand that rocks the cradle rules the world." The poem is an ode to motherhood and the important role that mothers play in shaping the people we become. It's a great reminder for all of us. If you're lucky enough to be able to, you should probably call your mother when this video is done. While this poem was written in 1865, this idea that the one who rocks the cradle rules the world is not a new one. In fact, in the ancient Near East, it was incredibly powerfully true. And this leads us to our discussion today on the Gebira. So, what in the world is a Gebira? The word Gebira appears 15 times in the Old Testament, and it has cognates that appear many more times. For example, the word Gibor is an adjective for great strength or power. Geber is used over 60 times to refer to a man, as in a strong man, differentiated from a woman or child. And Gebir, the masculine form of Gebira, is used twice to mean something like lord or master. Gebira, then, is the feminine form that means something like lady or even great lady. Given its cognates, it certainly refers to a position of authority and power, but for a woman. Sometimes this word is even translated as queen. The Hebrew word for king, melech, does have a feminine form, malkah, but this is only ever used to refer to non-Israelite queens. When the title Gebira is used in relation to Israelite, or more accurately Judahite women, it refers to a position of significant power and authority that is distinct from the king, but not exactly a queen. In light of what we understand of ancient Near Eastern states from textual sources, most scholars understand this term to refer to the position of the Queen Mother.
The role of the Queen Mother, at least in this sense, is something we don't really have in the modern Western world. The title of Queen Mother is still used in the British royal family, but it's more of an honorific than a position with authority. The significance of this position in the ancient world is found in how ancient states were structured. I know I'm going to gloss over a whole lot of what I consider very interesting state formation theory. I know that there are a lot of different ideas about how the ancient state was organized and philosophically based, but it's generally safe to say that the ancient state, as opposed to the 21st century nation-state model, had a familial foundation. That is to say, the government was understood as an extension of the family of the king. At a certain level, the state was an extension of the chief royal household. We see this expressed in how titles are given. We see Akkadian titles like Mar Akali, or son of the palace. They weren't blood relation to the king at all, but their authority was linked to the royal household. Actual blood relation sons of the king were called Mar Shari, or sons of the king. They were princes, but their authority was expressed in their relation to the king. Power was both relational and institutional, with relational power perhaps being the more important of the two. When it comes to women, we see many different relational titles employed in ancient states. There are some instances of women having the title Sal Lugal, which is the feminine of Lugal, and Sal Lugal then would be a rough equivalent to queen. But they also appear with the title Ama Lugal, or mother of the king. Titles like the favored wife, or chief wife, sister of the king, and so on are more than just factual relationships, they're titles with actual authority. Of the female roles with recognized authority, the Queen Mother was the ancient Near Eastern role with the most power. The Queen Mother was in many Near Eastern courts the most powerful woman in the kingdom, more powerful than many of the men even. While we don't have any political philosophy treatises from the ancient world outlining a flowchart of who was more or less powerful, the textual sources show that the Queen Mother was in many cases incredibly powerful, in no small part because of her influence in gaining the throne for her son. In fact, the promoting mother can even be recognized as a trope or a type of literature where a mother, one of the wives of a king or a patriarch, schemes and maneuvers her favored son into the position of next in line. This is seen in texts like the Kara epic or the story of Athar, both from Ugarit. And outside the realm of mythology at Ugarit, the king Amishtaru ascended to the throne in no small part because of the machinations of his mother Ahutmilku. And think also of Rachel conspiring with Jacob to steal Esau's birthright. At Mari, the textual evidence indicates the Queen Mother was the highest ranking woman, and only after she died did the chief wife of the king assume that role. Shibtu was one noteworthy example at Mari. She was the daughter of the king of Yamhad and was married off to Zimrilin, king of Mari, in an effort to ensure Zimrilin's position on the throne. At Mari, she supplanted 2 other wives of Zimrilin. Because we have excellent records of the correspondences from Mari, we see Shibtu exercise significant autonomy and influence. She made official judicial pronouncements, she communicated with royal officials on the king's behalf, she received petitions from those who felt they had been wronged, and these are all official court functions that she carried out on her own. The Hittite woman Puduhepa helped her husband, the king Hattusili III, gain the throne and secure the succession for her own son over his older brothers. During her husband's reign, she made direct correspondence with the Egyptian pharaoh Ramses the Great, and during her son's reign, she made pronouncements regarding the relations of Hittite vassal kingdoms. Again, these are all official functions of the state which she carried out under her own authority. Finally, the queen of Sennacherib, Nakiezakutu, was instrumental in getting her son Esarhaddon and grandson Ashurbanipal their seats on the throne. She was particularly respected during Esarhaddon's reign and given levels of respect usually reserved for the king himself. Court official even calls her as capable Adapa, which is unusually high praise.
When we turn to Judah in particular, we see the role of the Queen Mother was similarly important within the royal court. The only real debate within the academic literature is over how institutionalized the position of the Gebira was. Was it a formal position, or did it just manifest itself in ambitious mothers seeking to ensure their sons, and therefore their own, fortunes? While there are scholars in both camps, we fall into the one that sees the Gebira as an institutional court role, but with questions regarding the nature of the role and influence of the position still up for debate. The fact that this was an important role, institutional or not, is attested by the fact that every king of Judah's Gebira is listed in their accession formula, except for 3 of them. We see the formula here in Rehoboam's accession note in 1 Kings 14, and the next king, Abijah, in 1 Kings 15. Now, this continues until the end of the Judahite monarchy, with the exception of Jehoram, Ahaz, and Asa. Now, this may be because their mothers predeceased them, or because their grandmother retained the title. For Jehoram, this issue may be because he was married to Athaliah, the daughter of Jezebel, and Ahab, the northern kingdom of Israel, all figures that the Bible has a particularly negative perspective on. Speaking of the northern kingdom of Israel, we don't have any Gebira listed in the records of the northern kingdom. Now, this may be because Israel did not recognize the title, or more likely because Kings and Chronicles were compositions from Judah, and they didn't have the court records of Israel, or at least they didn't include them for various reasons. So, what was the role of the Gebira in Judah? Well, it's not always clear. We have more and more consistent references to the Gebira than just about any other Judahite court position, so it was clearly an important role. It almost certainly included being a kind of trusted counselor for the king. Who else would have your interests at heart if not your own mother? Another significant role of the Queen Mother was to play a role in the succession for the kingship and consequently for the role of Gebira. She would have influence over who would replace the king. This is clear in the story of Bathsheba and Solomon, where Adonijah began to set himself up as king just prior to David's death. But Bathsheba and the prophet Nathan appeal to David and get David to name Solomon as his heir. But the Gebira may also have had cultic responsibilities. Now, this is where a lot of the debate around the role of the Gebira actually lies. What was her role in the official religious practices of Judah? It seems clear that the king of Judah, not just the priests, had a significant role in the function of the temple in Jerusalem. But the story of Ma'akah, the grandmother of King Asa, indicates the Gebira had some cultic role as well. In 1 Kings 15, we're told that Ma'akah was the grandmother of Asa, and it's possible that either Asa's mother predeceased him or that she refused to relinquish her role as Gebira. Either way, at some point she set up a shrine to Asherah in the temple in Jerusalem. Now, Asherah worship was apparently quite widespread in ancient Israel and Judah. We have a whole video on Asherah and Asherah worship here if you want to check it out. But the conclusion we come to, based on textual and archaeological evidence, is that Asherah veneration was only taboo relatively late in Judahite history, and that for a long time it was at least tolerated, if not outright sanctioned. For example, Yehu reforms worship in the north and purges non-Yahwistic elements, but he apparently doesn't purge Asherah veneration. Now, this suggests that Yehu at least understood that this was an acceptable part of Yahwism. Here it seems that it was the Gebira Ma'akah who was partially responsible for the official veneration of Asherah in Judah. So, if Asherah veneration was a part of the royal cult, it is possible that this was the domain of the Gebira. And one more thing we didn't touch on is that the Judahite understanding of kingship is more sacral than that of the northern kingdom. Now, this is the idea that the Judahite king, as the successor of David, was understood at a certain level to be a son of Yahweh. Now, the best example of this is in Psalm 89, verses 27 and 28. Now, if you're a Christian, you probably see this as anticipating Jesus rather than referring to a human king. Now, that's not a wrong interpretation, but the original usage of this psalm would have been in confirming the extension of the Davidic covenant to the reigning king. If the king was the adopted son of Yahweh, then that has huge implications for his mother, the Gebira. She would have not only political but also divine authority, making her role in Judahite cultic practices all the more significant. Now, this idea also had a significant impact on how the early Christian community understood Mary, the mother of Jesus. The Queen Mother tradition was strongest in Near Eastern cultures, not Greco-Roman ones. But it continued long after the fall of the Israelite and Judahite monarchies. New Testament audiences would have been familiar with the powerful Queen Mother figure. Catholic teachers read the Gebira into Matthew chapter 2, where Jesus is presented as King of the Jews. Joseph is notably absent from the adoration of the Magi, and only Mary and Jesus are present, and Mary is here the Queen Mother. Now, there's a lot to mine on the Mary as Queen Mother motif that I'm sure Catholic scholars have done, but that's not our area of expertise. We're both Protestants, so we don't necessarily affirm the Marian dogmas, but it's interesting and we think important to note that these beliefs didn't appear out of nowhere. They stem from a long tradition that ties back to the Old Testament itself, even if the interpretive connections are up for debate. For us, the main takeaway from this exploration of the role of the Gebira is that it was an avenue through which women, or at least one woman at a time, exercised significant political and religious authority in ancient Judah. Now, while we read that kings and priests in the Old Testament were all men, that doesn't mean that women had no way to exert influence, even at the highest levels of power. The Gebira was an important and revered role that steered the direction of the kingdom's politics and worship. At least in Judah, the hand that rocked the cradle continued to rule the world long after her baby had grown up. Thanks for joining us for this Beneath the Bible video. If you liked what you saw, be sure to give this video a like and hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any future videos. You can also follow us on social media, on Twitter and Facebook at Beneath the Bible. If you learned something new today, take a minute to share this video with your friends. And until next time, keep digging.
Thank you.